The skies over Southeast Asia became one of the most demanding aerial combat environments in modern history, where American and North Vietnamese pilots flew jet aircraft through surface-to-air missiles and close-quarters dogfights that would fundamentally reshape aviation doctrine and pilot training for generations to come. Entering the cockpit. A pilot assigned to Southeast Asia operations in the mid-1960s arrived at his aircraft through a process that had changed dramatically from earlier generations. Pre-flight procedures for jet fighters involved systematic inspection of airframe, engine intakes, control surfaces, and ordnance attachment points. The complexity of these aircraft demanded rigorous attention before any mission commenced. A single overlooked discrepancy could compound under the stress of combat into catastrophic failure hundreds of miles from friendly territory. Starting the engine of a fighter jet in this era produced a sequence of mechanical and electronic events that required the pilot's full attention. Turbine spool-up, hydraulic pressure confirmation, avionics initialization, and weapons system checks all preceded taxi clearance. The pilot communicated with ground crews through hand signals and interphone systems. By the time the aircraft reached the runway threshold, the pilot had already worked through dozens of procedures, establishing the methodical discipline that separated professional military aviation from all other forms of flight.
The F-105 Thunderchief. The Republic F-105 Thunderchief became the primary strike aircraft over North Vietnam during the early years of American involvement. This aircraft had been designed to deliver a nuclear weapon at supersonic speed and low altitude, and its internal bomb bay and powerful engine reflected that original purpose. Adapted for conventional bombing operations, the Thunderchief carried enormous external ordnance loads against heavily defended targets in the north. Flying an F-105 on a rolling Thunder strike mission placed the pilot at the center of an extraordinarily complex operation. Ingress routes were planned to minimize exposure to surface-to-air missile batteries, but North Vietnamese defensive networks adapted rapidly to American routing patterns. The pilot navigated at high speed and low altitude to complicate missile targeting, relying on inertial systems and visual landmarks in terrain that offered few reliable reference points. The Thunderchief's speed and payload capacity made it valuable, but its size and weight compromised maneuverability. When MiG interceptors engaged strike formations, F-105 pilots found themselves at a significant disadvantage in turning combat. The aircraft had been built for speed and payload, not air-to-air maneuvering. Pilots developed specific tactics to exploit the Thunderchief's straight-line speed advantage, disengaging from dogfights rather than contesting them against more agile opponents. Losses among Thunderchief units mounted significantly during sustained operations over North Vietnam. The aircraft's resilience and the skill of its pilots sustained the campaign, but the combination of anti-aircraft artillery, surface-to-air missiles, and fighter opposition created attrition rates that could not be sustained indefinitely. The F-4 Phantom II. The McDonnell F-4 Phantom II entered the Vietnam War as the most capable aircraft in the American inventory and became the defining fighter of the conflict. Originally designed for the Navy as a fleet defense interceptor, the Phantom carried a crew of 2 and relied entirely on radar-guided and infrared missiles for its armament, reflecting confidence that future air combat would occur beyond visual range. That confidence proved misplaced in the specific conditions of Southeast Asian air warfare. Rules of engagement frequently required visual identification before weapons release, eliminating much of the missile system's intended advantage. The Phantom's lack of an internal cannon became a significant tactical liability when engagements developed into close-range maneuvering combat against Vietnamese MiG fighters. Sitting in the front cockpit of a Phantom during an air-to-air engagement demanded simultaneous management of multiple competing priorities. The radar intercept officer in the rear cockpit provided targeting information, missile system status, and threat warnings.
Communication between the two crew members under combat stress required practiced efficiency and mutual trust. Decisions about missile employment, maneuvering, and threat response unfolded in seconds, drawing on training that attempted to compress years of experience into manageable procedures. The Phantom proved capable when employed correctly. At medium altitudes and speeds where it could sustain energy through maneuvers, the aircraft performed effectively against North Vietnamese opponents. Pilots who understood its energy management characteristics and avoided sustained low-speed turning fights could exploit the Phantom's thrust and climb performance. As the war progressed, a cannon pod was added externally, partially addressing the close-range armament deficiency, and later variants incorporated an internal gun. The MiG threat. North Vietnamese pilots flew Soviet-supplied MiG-17, MiG-19, and MiG-21 fighters against American strike formations. Each of these aircraft posed distinct challenges that required different tactical responses. The MiG-17 was a subsonic fighter of Korean War vintage, but its exceptional low-speed maneuverability made it dangerous in close-range combat. American pilots who allowed engagements to develop into turning fights at reduced speed often found the older aircraft could outmaneuver them within visual range. North Vietnamese pilots had been coached specifically to exploit this characteristic, accepting the initial disadvantage of engaging faster opponents by forcing combat into the low-speed regime where their aircraft excelled. The MiG-21 represented a more modern threat. This supersonic interceptor carried radar-guided missiles and could engage American aircraft from beyond visual range under favorable conditions. North Vietnamese ground controllers directed MiG-21 pilots onto attack positions using radar networks that provided accurate targeting information. Hit-and-run tactics allowed MiG-21 pilots to fire and disengage before American escort fighters could respond, creating uncertainty in strike formations that itself constituted a form of tactical success.
Surface-to-air missiles. The surface-to-air missile environment over North Vietnam represented the most sophisticated integrated air defense system American aviators had yet encountered. Soviet-supplied SA-2 guideline missiles were radar-guided and capable of engaging targets at the altitudes where American strike aircraft operated. Detection of an incoming missile gave pilots only seconds to respond. The evasion maneuver against an SA-2 required precise timing and situational awareness. Braking too early allowed the missile's guidance system to correct its trajectory. Braking too late left insufficient time to defeat the missile's pursuit geometry. The maneuver demanded the pilot maintain awareness of the missile's approach angle while simultaneously managing aircraft energy and avoiding collision with terrain or other aircraft in the formation. Electronic warfare aircraft accompanied strike packages specifically to suppress and deceive radar systems controlling surface-to-air missiles. Wild Weasel crews flew dedicated suppression missions, actively seeking out radar emissions and attacking the sites. These missions required pilots and electronic warfare officers to fly directly toward the threat systems they were trying to destroy, accepting initial exposure to attack the radar before it could guide missiles effectively. Close air support missions. Not all combat flying over Vietnam took place in the highly contested airspace of the North. Close air support missions in the South placed pilots in a fundamentally different operational environment. Flying in support of ground troops in contact, pilots coordinated with forward air controllers who directed strikes against targets often within close proximity to friendly forces. The precision required for close air support exceeded what navigation systems of the era reliably provided. Pilots made multiple passes to confirm target identification before weapons release. The combination of terrain, vegetation, and the fluid nature of ground combat in Southeast Asia made accurate ordnance delivery consistently challenging. Experienced forward air controllers became essential links between the ground situation and the aircraft overhead, translating the chaos of ground combat into actionable guidance for pilots who had only brief windows to observe and engage targets. The night and weather environment. Operations continued through monsoon seasons and at night, placing additional demands on pilot skill and equipment. Early in the conflict,
Night operations required aircraft to carry their own illumination in the form of flares, which created visible signatures and compromised surprise. Instrument approaches to airfields in deteriorating weather conditions after combat missions, often with battle damage affecting aircraft systems, represented some of the most demanding flying the conflict produced. The air war over Vietnam produced a comprehensive reassessment of how fighter aircraft should be designed, armed, and crewed. The encounters between American and North Vietnamese pilots demonstrated that beyond visual range missile technology had not eliminated the need for maneuvering close-range combat capability. The importance of cannon armament, pilot training in dogfighting, and situational awareness led directly to the establishment of advanced fighter weapons schools designed to restore air combat proficiency. Aircraft designs that followed incorporated internal guns, improved maneuverability, and better cockpit visibility. The demanding environment of Southeast Asian air warfare, with its combination of guided missiles, sophisticated radar networks, and skilled opponents, established conditions that forced a generation of tactical aviation development. The pilots who flew these missions carried with them knowledge purchased at significant cost, knowledge that fundamentally shaped the character of military aviation for the decades that followed.